Okay, so this is on chapter 5 of the Head First SQL book. And this chapter, after going over the first normal form in the last chapter, it goes over altering the table. And the other chapter hit on altering the table a little bit. This is just a review of the exact little tidbit of SQL code that we used. We say alter table, table name, and in this case we're adding a column that happens to be the primary key. So obviously there are a lot more operations that are possible when we are altering our table, and a lot of this chapter is dedicated to what all can you do when you're altering a table. So simply you could just add a column without any other conditions. So we can say alter table, table name, and then add column, and then we say the name of the column, and then the data type. And that is the order, the syntactical order that is very common in SQL, is we have our keywords, and then the name of whatever it is, and then the data type. Now, relative location is another feature of SQL. So we can say where in the existing table would we like to place our new column. So here we have alter table, my contacts, add column, phone, data type, and we say where do we want to put our phone column? Because by default it'll just put it at the end. And maybe you do want phone at the end, so you just wouldn't say anything, or maybe you want it in a specific place. And so in this case, we say after, and then a column name, after first name. And here are some other options. You can just say first, you can say after a column, before a column, second, third, last. So the relative placement is pretty robust in SQL. You can put it anywhere you want with relative ease. So, renaming a table. This is also kind of a sub-command of the alter table command. So we just say alter table, table name, and this actually happens a lot in the real world doing development. Somebody gives a table a really crappy name, and it might be because they just weren't having a good day. It might be because it's a typo. It might be because it's somebody not familiar with the project, but they name it something like god awful, and it looks terrible, and so you want to fix it. So to fix it, you would say alter table, table name, and then rename to, and then your new table name. And the only thing this affects is the name. It doesn't affect any data within the table. It's pretty logical. It's just you have to know that the syntax is rename to. And again, it is preceded by alter table and then the table name. So this is a little bit more advanced. This is the change keyword. And the change keyword and the modify keyword are very closely related, but they're slightly different. So first I'm going to focus on the change keyword. Again, like most things in this chapter, it's preceded by alter table and then the table name. And then change, you use change when you also would like to change the name of the column. Modify is when you wish to keep the name but change the attributes. So the syntax for our change thing is we say change column and then the original name. So this is all stuff we know. And then this part is what we want to change it to. So if we just had a column called number, we're changing it to proj underbar ID. We want it to be an integer. We do not want it to take null values, and we'd like it to auto increment. And that sounds an awful lot like a primary key because we're making it a unique integer that cannot be null. And sure enough, it's add primary key below that, and then whatever we just renamed it to. And of course, you'd only have that if you were changing a column to a primary key. Here are some simpler examples of that. It's the same thing. You just say change column, original name, and then new name, data type, any other attributes, anything you want to tack onto it. And one thing to be very, very careful of is that it is very possible for you to screw up your table if you change it to a different data type, because SQL will try to convert it. There's no guarantee that it will be properly converted, and if you accidentally say that you're changing, let's just say contractor on job was 300 characters, and then we change it to con name, but we forgot an O here. So it would take the first 30 characters of everything, but you wouldn't have a way to retrieve those other possibly up to 270 other characters. So it's very important that you back up your databases before you try any of these change or modify commands. And here's an example of the modify command. As you can see, very, very similar to change, except that it does not change the name, but it still is equally as dangerous. So we say modify column, and that's the keyword part, and then the name of the column we're modifying, and then the new data type. And again, tack on anything you want. It's just modify will not change the name, and that's the only real difference between change and modify. When you change the name, and modify is just you modify the existing column and do not touch the name. Now, another important keyword is drop. Again, it might seem a little bit redundant, but we have to prefix it with alter table. And drop, we can drop a column just using very English sounding syntax, drop column, and then the column name. And this will totally destroy the column. So if you are totally positive you want to nuke that column, then you can use drop column. But you're done if you drop the wrong column, if you destroy something that you didn't mean to. Like most things in SQL, there are no do-overs unless you're doing something like using a Git repository and backing up your SQL, or if you're just backing up your SQL files manually beforehand, but you can't really get back a dropped column. And so you can do a select, like we talked about in an earlier video, just like you do before you do a delete statement, where you make sure that you do not have any data being cut out that you didn't mean to cut out. And this is just kind of a rehash. I'm not really sure why they put this in the book, but this is just kind of a rehash. It's just showing, remember, before all of these, before add, change, modify, rename, you need to have alter table name. And there aren't any commas or parentheses or anything like that. So, like here we can say alter table, whatever the name is, rename to something. And then here it looks like we're putting in a primary key. And the characteristics of adding in a primary key are It's an integer, it can't be null, it auto increments, and it's the leftmost or first column in the table. And we're adding a column, and again the syntax is add column, new column name, column data type, and then here are attributes, and in this case it's saying make this the second column. And we have our change and our modify. Now, one of the little abstract features of SQL is that it has these things called functions, and it's just like if you've done any programming, like there are methods which are kind of like functions as part of an object, and then there are functions which are external implemented algorithms that are very similar to methods. And so here we have some handy string functions, and these can go along with select statements. So to start out, we have one called write. So we can say select write, and then in the parentheses, because just like if you're using functions in PHP, just like if you're using functions in PHP, you have parameters in parentheses. So for our function called write, we have two parameters. One of them is the column that we're looking at, and the other one is an integer that is how many characters to select. So in this case, we say select the rightmost two characters from location from my contacts. And if we go up, here's what that looks like. Here's what the location looks like. So as you can see, last two characters would be likely an American state abbreviation. And another one that's a little bit more abstract is Substring Index. And as you can see, this uses three parameters. It takes in the column, the delimiter, and another integer. And so I'll spend a little bit of time going over this one because it's a little bit more abstract than like just the write function. So substring index, we take in the column name, that's right here, and then we take in the delimiter, and this is sort of what we're looking at to split. And this number, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain that. It's looking for, well, okay, so what they say is it's 1 because it's looking for the first comma. And so let's see if they have an example of this. So select substring San Antonio, Texas. Oh no, sorry, that's regular substring. This is substring index. And so this gets you everything in front of the first comma that's in location. So this would get you effectively the city if we're looking at our example, which is right here. Sorry about that. I got confused between substring and substring index. So just to make sure, the column name is the first parameter. The second parameter is what you want to split by, and the third parameter is which one of those splitters you want to look for. And it grabs everything in front of, but not including this. So here are some other SQL functions. These are a little bit less strenuous than the substring index function. Here we have an example of the substring function, and we have San Antonio, Texas, comma 5, comma 3. So this second parameter is the start position, And as you probably are familiar with from pretty much any programming language, it's zero indexed. So we would say start out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we start off at 5, and then unlike a lot of substring methods in programming languages, the length is the third parameter, and that's how much of the string you want to give back. And so this would give you 3 characters. And upper and lower, pretty obvious. It'll just give you back your text in all uppercase or all lowercase. Reverse also, same thing, just gives you your text backwards. Now, ltrim and rtrim are very similar to if you've done Java and you've used the trim string method, except it's just kind of 2 methods that if you use them both, it'll accomplish the same thing. It chops out all white space before or after any string, and length of the string will tell you how many characters are in the string, and that does count white spaces. They have a little warning here. It's probably a pretty important thing to look at. Just like in Java, strings are immutable, and these functions will not change the strings. These functions will solely output. They will output things that can be manipulated, but the initial strings, the initial entries, will never be changed by these. So if you run an upper on something in a database column, that entry will not be converted to uppercase. And again, I would highly recommend that you do some puzzles like this in the book, just to make sure that you have all of this down, especially these functions and what they actually do. I mean, even I've studied this for a long time, and I forgot exactly what the syntax for substring index was, and so I would highly recommend that you put in some practice with what you think it'll output and what it actually does output. So this part of the chapter shows you how you can fill up a new column. So we can use our alter table, add column something, which is great, but then it's all blank. So how do you fill that up? And of course, one way would be to just say set everything to this, which is valid, but it might not be the most helpful and it might not be the most useful. So one way is to actually use these functions. And so if we were converting our table to something more atomic and we had entries that were currently city, state, and we use something in that in a similar format to that, where we can parse it by commas, or we can just take like the right 2 characters. In this case, we just say if we wanted to add a column called state, we could just set it to the right 2 characters of location. And so this would set every entry's state column to the right 2 characters of that row's location. And like she's saying, this works without a where clause because it's implied that when you're setting the state to the right 2 characters of location, that you're looking just at the current or the location that is entered in the same row you're working with. And those are the examples of it. And so that's the end of this chapter. One of the biggest things that people forget is that you need to put in alter table before you can perform most of these changes. And a lot of it is just practice, like with most things in SQL. Be super careful when you drop anything, change, modify, because those, you usually can't recover your data unless you're following proper retention practices, which I would take a guess most people are not. So please be very careful with that. The string functions are a little dicey. So, well, a few of them are a little dicey, and those are also just practice. They come very easily once you've done them a few times. And remember that those string functions are very, very useful for populating new columns, for extracting data, for making it more readable. And what's very, very nice about those is that you don't have to worry about anything being permanently modified solely by a string function. So, the next chapter is about advanced selects, which goes into all this in a little bit more detail, but that's all for this video. And yeah, thank you for watching.